Welcome everybody to Viva YouTube channel. I don't know what else to call it. I don't know what else to say about it. With me is Jesuit scholastic John Guerra. He's been a Jesuit now for
5 years.
5 years.
5 years.
And currently in his period called Regency. So Jesuits, when they join the novitiate, will work for 2 years and be a novice. Then they will go and study philosophy, which you did
I did in St. Louis University.
At St. Louis University. Yesterday we had David Paternostro on, who's working at St. Louis University right now. And then they will often take a break from studies and go to work for a few years, often teaching in a high school. And that's what you're doing now.
That's right. I'm teaching at Cristo Rey Jesuit High School in Houston, Texas, teaching theology there and working on the curriculum and doing all kinds of fun stuff.
So. What is the difference between a Cristo Rey school, a Cristo Rey Jesuit school? Some of them are Jesuit schools, some of them are not, but the Cristo Rey model and the sort of classical model of Jesuit education.
Yeah. So the Cristo Rey model school, it's a whole network of schools. I think a good number of schools in the United States now are Cristo Rey Jesuit schools, which means they're sponsored and run by the Society of Jesus. And there are Jesuits there working, teaching theology, working in administration, working in my community, working in the science department and in student life. What we do at Cristo Rey high schools, which is different from other Jesuit high schools which have been around for a long time, it's a corporate work study program. So the students go and work for 1 day a week in businesses in the metropolitan area where they are to help pay for their education and to learn, skills in business and professional skills. But also that means a longer work day. So they have 8 periods a day. They work from 7:25 in the morning until 4 p.m. and then they do extracurriculars and sports and stuff. So it's a tough life in high school for them, and there's all kinds of stuff going on to try to make it as normal of a high school, Jesuit high school experience as we can. Morale's good, and we're trying to make a difference in our cities where we build these.
So these schools specifically cater to the
underprivileged communities who can't afford a private Catholic education.
Young men and women who might not otherwise have been in the demographic likely to graduate from high school at all. And now they are at Cristo Rey. And what is the graduation rate at Cristo Rey for high school?
For high school, I think it's 100%. High school graduation rate, and we're ranked. Cristo Rey Jesuit in Houston is ranked number four among all of the Cristo Rey schools in the country concerning university retention rate. And that's 4-year university bachelor degrees. So
I made a face like I looked surprised when you said that. Like, oh, really? The fact is, I knew that because I'm on the board at Cristo Rey, so I've seen the presentations and I've seen all that kind of stuff. I hear good things about the work you're doing, and that's great. So I always think that Cristo Rey model works out so well because you have young men and women who might not otherwise be around people who get dressed up for work, right? Think about it that way. So it's not like nobody's employed in their communities or in their families or anything like that, but this gives them a chance to be around people who wear a necktie every day. And so you sort of just get to bridge that life, the life that you live in and the life of school, and then the life of being an intern at a big business in, for example, Houston, Texas.
And then becoming leaders of those businesses, hopefully one day, and branching out, because what an underprivileged community lacks are simply the connections and the advantages which would lead them into those sorts of businesses in the future.
An underprivileged community needs those connections. I think a privileged community needs those connections as well. So to have people who bring the concerns, the experiences of these poorer communities into that world, I think sensitizes everybody on both sides.
That's right.
Of that.
And when we talk a lot about a need for diversity and inclusion these days, Cristo Rey schools actually make it happen. Right? Because you've got leaders in the community. You're reconciling two communities which before Cristo Rey schools probably wouldn't have a lot of time to be with each other. And so now we're bringing those two worlds together.
I've heard it described as a Jesuit education with the added piece of work experience. So anybody coming to a place like Jesuit High School in New Orleans is getting a fine education. They're going to do very well on their standardized tests. They're going to get into the universities that they want to get into. They're also going to be, I think, prepared spiritually for that whole world out there. Be prepared to see the world in the way that Christ intended and to become the man that they were made to be. I think the very same thing is happening at Cristo Rey. except they also get that work experience before they ever go to college. They already know what it's like to live in that world and mix up that world in a way that they might not have had a chance to otherwise.
That's right. In the formula of the Institute, which are the constitutions written by St. Ignatius of Loyola, what is the Society of Jesus? What are the Jesuits? What is our mission? What's our charism, and how do we do it? One of the first things he lists is teaching catechism to unlettered children and going out to the margins of cities and towns to accomplish this task for the defense and propagation of the Catholic faith and the help of souls in Christian life. And what we're doing at Cristo Rey Jesuit is that same way of education, that same way of beauty, I'll call it, especially since that's the title of our video.
That's
today.
what we're really here to talk about.
Because I went here to Jesuit high school, and I was taught by you. You were my teacher. And the liturgy here is beautiful. The building is beautiful. The teaching is beautiful. Everything.
And getting better every day.
And getting better every day.
Yeah.
Constantly improving. And
never changing.
Well, yeah. But what that experience brought me was something that I thought I could share with any other Jesuit high school, which has been around for a long time, which might be a little more affluent, right? But then I'm at a Cristo Rey Jesuit school now, where none of the students are in wealthy communities.
Right.
And so what's going on there? They have been essentially robbed of the beauty of the Catholic faith, robbed of the beauty of and the aesthetic of Christ, which is their right as a human being, which he's brought into the world. And so bringing that Catholic identity and that Catholic, I don't know, what do you call it? That Catholic mind, which understands the world in a certain way, which sees the cosmos in a way where Christ is at its beginning, its center, and its end. Bringing that to a poor, underprivileged community so that they might become leaders out in the world is not just bridging a gap in the world, it's bridging a spiritual gap.
So I spent some time in Latin America, right? I've spent a long time in Latin America. Lived in down in southern Mexico for an entire year of my life, spent time at the border, spent time all over the place. And what I've noticed is that what you get is often the group way of expressing themselves, religious piety, for example, their masses, things like that, are often these strange kind of mixes of deep and strongly felt piety, right? So little old ladies kissing statues. I mean, just rubbing the feet of statues, that are often meant to be put up so high that they couldn't reach them, and they'll find a way to reach them and then touch them and kiss them and love them. And then at the same time, I remember I was at a mass at one small chapel out in kind of a rural area in Mexico. And at the consecration, instead of bells, they had fireworks. So and you can imagine this kind of concrete building that just everything was already super echoey, right. And then bang, 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 bang. I didn't know if this was like something terrible was happening, but this is what's going on. You sort of have this weird aesthetic that is hard, at least for me, to grasp.
Well, it's certainly a different interpretation of "May this building tremble and shake with joy."
Right.
Exultate. They're like, "All right, let's blow it up." No.
Yeah. And I don't want to say like, okay, so this is like harsh judgment about. Not at all. No. I want to recognize that this is a genuine attempt at doing something special.
That's right.
Fireworks don't grow on trees, right? So this is somebody went out and bought fireworks. It was important to them.
That's right.
And they popped these fireworks.
And they're rare.
And they're rare. And so something rare was happening there. And it was like, you weren't going to not be able to pay attention at that moment, right? It was, well, in some sense, you're paying attention to something, right? You're paying attention to something.
And this otherness is what makes a lot of people uncomfortable. It used to make me uncomfortable because there's one way that I do the faith. There's one way I understand it. Sure. Teaching it to children. Yeah. Teaching it to poor children.
Right.
It can seem like things are watered down, but not the case. It's like when you take that one little grain off the Eucharistic host, it's the whole Christ. Yeah. In the same way, we can give things in a way which are better for us. It's better for me to have been teaching the faith in this way, and I've only been doing it for a few months. It's a different expression of the same Christ in his whole, and so, it's wonderful.
So the Catholic Church teaches that beauty is objective.
It is,
right? It is objective. It is not just subjective. The person, how they feel, like some people like broccoli, some people don't like broccoli. We're talking about not just a matter of taste, but a difference between taste and no taste, right? Not just good taste and bad taste, but like no real taste sometimes, or a very well developed taste for beauty. And I think this is a quick story. Long ago, I was watching a football game, and I think it was Brent Mossberger was calling the football game, and it was, I forget who was playing, but maybe it was like the girlfriend of the quarterback who was maybe either Alabama or Georgia. God forgive me, I don't remember. But the camera zoomed in. I remember this moment. The camera zoomed in on the quarterback's girlfriend, and it zoomed in tight because she was, I believe, Miss Mississippi. Right? I think the quarterback's girlfriend was literally a beauty contest winner. Okay, and so they zoomed in. And Brent Mossberger says, "Oh, young men, go out of the yard right now and start practicing football because you too could have a girl this beautiful, right? Like as if somehow she was the picture of beauty." And I remember looking at her and thinking, there's no doubt she is an attractive woman. I think she's his wife now and the mother of lots of children. I think she's a committed Christian. I don't mean to say a bad thing about her, but at the time I remember thinking, she's really beautiful. And then like pretty quickly, my mind was moving to a place of like, look at how much makeup she has on. Like, is it bringing out her beauty or is it covering something up? Not only is she covering up everything and changing the color of her hair and the way she's dressed is there to sort of bring out her beauty maybe, but it was also like, it also felt fake in a way that made me say, I appreciate that kind of beauty less. Now, if I had seen that 5 years before that, I might have felt very differently. But because I had been much more prayerful, because I had been much more living my faith, praying the Psalms, spending more time in churches, that sort of thing, it made her beauty seem less like fireworks and more.
I love what you're saying, because when beauty is not sure of itself, it takes itself for granted and covers itself, or tries to make itself reveal something other than what it is.
Yeah.
Because it's not sure of itself. When beauty is sure of itself, it becomes clear. I'll give you an example. A friend of mine, a Jesuit brother, and I were talking about this. You think of an old shriveled up grandma or grandpa in a nursing home, and you go see your grandma and grandpa, and you look at them, you don't think they're ugly. You don't stay away from them because their faces look like leather. They're losing hair. They may not have much hair left. You know, they might be blind. They might be deaf. They might have some sort of injury on their face or anything. So these blemishes on their skin, these wrinkles on their skin, their inability to do much for themselves, you find it beautiful. You go towards it. You treat it with such gentle care, you know, or like a baby fresh out of the womb. You know, you're like, whoa, you know what I mean? That baby is
shaped like a pea.
That's right. They're red. They're covered with blood. You know what I mean? Yet those are the things that we treat with the most dignity, or at least should. And the countries and nations and societies and philosophies and religions which don't, we know that there's something off kilter there. We know something's wrong there. Why? Because we as humans understand this universal language of a beauty which is not hiding itself because it is insecure.
Yeah.
It's just what the creature is.
Yeah.
When an old person or an infant are just the way they are, they let go. They go, you know, I'm going to stop dyeing my hair. People say this all the time. You know, when a woman stops dyeing her hair, they go, oh, I love the gray. You know what I mean?
In fact, I do. I think women with gray hair are often, there's something else radiating that I find to be beautiful. Okay. So here's sort of playing devil's advocate here for where we're going with the conversation. There are a lot of people for whom, you know, when they think about liturgy, for example, they think the best, most beautiful kind of liturgy is the kind of liturgy where we just get real, right? So like, let's just get real. Like why not wear blue jeans and a t-shirt and why not sing songs that I listen to on the radio all day? Why not offer God something more, you know, less dyed, less made up, less painted over? Why not offer God a liturgy that says, this is real, this is really who I am, warts and all? Mm-hmm. What do you think?
Well, I want to answer that question, but I want to bring in another side to it that I think we should also critique, which is the other side of the ideological spectrum, where they're using makeup to cover up something really real that's going on behalf of Jesus Christ. So you can have people wearing grandma's lace, you know, up there, like priests who are wearing lots and lots and lots of lace. They have to have all the bells, they have to have all that, and they have to be like you know, robots in a way. Mm-hmm. There is a staunchly centered and moderate way to obey the rubrics, even meticulously so, in the liturgical books, which bring out the Christ who is the priest, not the priest and not the you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because we listen to radio music and wear jeans all day. You know what I mean? We put
Right.
makeup on and cover up our beauty all day, but at the moment of the Mass, this short little, it can be 30 minutes, it can be an hour. I mean, it's just a short moment in time. This is the moment where we are gathering all of that up into the body of Jesus as he successfully offers himself back to the Father. That sacred moment is being done in his flesh. And we're receiving something outside of ourselves. We're receiving his flesh so we can be drawn up into that offering.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're not going to receive blue jeans and radio music we've been hearing all day.
Right.
We're also not going to receive the neuroses of a very, overly, traditional person trying to overcompensate for a lot of insecurities. We're going to receive Christ. And so we take on the aesthetic of Christ, the aesthetic of the church. And those aesthetics are actually very particular. And the councils throughout the church tell us what those are.
Right.
It has nothing to do with our liturgical preference. If the liturgy was about our liturgical preference being right or wrong, we're totally missing the point.
Yeah.
It's about what is Christ's preference.
Yeah.
And the church, with the gift of the Holy Spirit, tells us exactly what that is.
Yeah. Who's being served here?
Who's being served here?
Who's being served?
And who's doing the serving?
Mm-hmm.
Are we feeding ourselves the Blessed Sacrament?
Yeah.
Or is Jesus feeding us the Blessed Sacrament? It literally comes down from
Yeah.
heaven.
Yeah. I remember as a novice, we were in Grand Coteau, Louisiana as novices, and it's hot. It's really, really hot. You enter, back in those days, everyone entered on August the 15th. And I remember those first few days, you want to be wearing a t-shirt and shorts, you're right. You want to be maybe even some kind of sandals or something, like it's just hot. And I remember the novice master said, when it's time for Mass, go put your pants on, go put your long pants on, put a button up shirt on. That's the way it's going to be.
Yeah.
And I remember being consoled by the fact that, like, even though Mass was going to be just us, right? And I put that in quotes because it's not really true, but Mass was just us. The novice master said, it doesn't matter. Everybody needs to be dressed appropriately for this moment. Now, that's in the Jesuit world, you eventually receive the collar after a few weeks in the novitiate and everything like that. You're not allowed to wear a collar right away. You have to wait at least a couple of weeks while you're there, after what's called first probation and all that kind of stuff if you want to get into the weeds. But I remember in those first few weeks, the necessity of having to wear a buttoned shirt and long pants and that sort of thing, of like saying, even though we are only amongst ourselves in this room that anybody's ever going to see us, we are offering God ourselves in our most dignified way, not covered up in a fake way, but in a dignified way that short pants and t-shirt just
we do it for sports. We don't see any problem with it. You will wear a Saints jersey to a Saints game.
Right.
That's a good thing. That's a very good thing. It makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, if we dress a certain way to go to the opera and then we dress down for Mass, I mean, what is that saying about what we think about Mass? Mm-hmm. And there could be something good there that you're overcompensating for. You're saying, the Lord wants all of me. The Lord wants all of my life right now, the way it is. That's true. That is very, very true. I'm not denying that at all. But to show your attention to the significance of his imbuing your life, this moment, this time, this body, with his very self, with God's own life, that it demands a different response. And that's where my definition of beauty begins to change in my studies compared to ancient philosophers, even Bonaventure and Aquinas. So tell me more about that. Right now you are just past the sort of first stage of philosophy and studies. We call it philosophy, but in fact we also study quite a bit of theology as well. Yeah, and humanities. And the humanities, right? So what are some of the studies that fed you or sort of helped form your worldview about beauty and Definitely ancient philosophy. So I was a seminarian for the Archdiocese of New Orleans for 2 years before I became a Jesuit. So I studied in a philosophy here in Covington, Louisiana, at a Benedictine monastery. I had a great ancient philosophy professor, Dr. Corey Hayes, who taught me ancient philosophy. He taught me all of the Greek terms, had me read through all kinds of dialogues and things like that. The one that hit me the most, which got me started on beauty, was the Symposium, Plato's Symposium. And I began writing on the four loves at the time, C.S. Lewis, St. Augustine, and Thomas Aquinas, and combined them all and realized, oh my gosh, there's a symphony going on here. What's going on? So really trying to synthesize those things together. And so moving on from there, I went fast forward. I'm working on a degree in philosophy at St. Louis University as a vowed Jesuit. And I continue using that research I did on the four loves, but particularly on Plato's Symposium. And combine Thomas Aquinas' understanding of beauty with that idea and St. Bonaventure's Itinerarium Mentis in Deum, which, if you can find a translation in English, read it. Very beautiful reading. You can read it on your own time in adoration, anywhere. You're going to increase in peace. You're going to increase in love. You're going to increase in faith and hope and understanding of the world and of yourself and of Christ. Because what it is it's finally a mystical flip of the coin, where you see the mystical side of this ancient philosophical ascent to this big transcendental idea of beauty with a capital B. Bonaventure lets it descend into his heart in a very Eucharistic way, I would argue. And he puts mystical, spiritual, human language to what this means for me in my life right now. What is beauty for me? Not just how can I study beauty over here and defend it and understand rebuttals against it, as we would do in scholasticism, which is absolutely vital to finding essential definitions. But what Bonaventure does is it's sort of the spiritual exercises to the scripture of Thomas, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm mesmerized by what you're talking about, because I'm remembering back in my mind right now to studying these guys, and I know I've been moved by beauty for a long time, right? So as a young man, I kind of dreamed of being a professional artist and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And these days, I don't always get to practice that, but except in other things like the way that I celebrate Mass, the way that I think about the nature of the campus of the high school that I'm at right now and everything. You, in your, I guess it's your spare time, work on music. Is that what you do in your spare time?
That's what I do. Yeah. So I compose sacred music for the church, and that's been an evolution for me. I mean, I started with like a rock and roll, youth band. That's what we were for Mass with a bunch of my classmates and friends in grammar school. And then I moved on to University of Dallas for a semester in undergrad, and I did praise and worship and adoration and all that, became a worship leader, and then moved on from that to the seminary where I learned Gregorian chant polyphony, and then entering the Society of Jesus. They gave me all the resources to start learning how to be a composer of sacred music and to learn more and study more. So I've been given a chance to study the voice, to study keyboard writing, to study orchestra and things like that. Even have the Society of Jesus has given me my first chance to have an orchestra play at my first Mass at our ordinations this past summer in St. Louis. Yeah. So that was awesome.
That is awesome. I remember so for myself, I never liked any of that sort of like praise and worshipy stuff. There's a cartoon that no one should ever watch. It's called South Park. No one should ever watch it. But there's this one kind of bit that they do where they're making fun of praise and worship music, where they're saying essentially it's a love song, except they just put Jesus's name into it.
Oh yeah.
So they're like, oh Jesus, I'm in love with you, all this kind of weird stuff,
Oh yeah.
And it's kind of accurate, right? It's kind of accurate that you could take a lot of that style of music that's popular and everything, and then just say, well, I'll just say that I love Jesus instead. And maybe there's some kind of mystical bride imagery there or something that. But I never liked it. I never liked it at all. I never enjoyed it at all. I always kind of joked and said, I like a little bit of devil in my rock and roll,
Yeah. No, I get
just to
that.
kind of joke about that. But I have always thought that Gregorian chant and polyphony and those kind of things have always been something that I right away recognized as beautiful and uniquely ours and Catholic in a sense, right? So I'm sure there's other people that listen to it and gain a lot from it. But I always remember thinking, ooh, that's mine. Like that's not that I own it, but that I share in that. And there's something beautiful about that. And I always felt like the adults during my youth, the adults were trying to get me to like the cool stuff, trying to get me to like the modern stuff, trying to get me to like all that. And I just was never into it. I never got into it at all.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's very much like language, right? So if beauty is objective, then so are like let's think about an idea, like a horse. Think of a horse right now. I'm saying horse, but somebody who speaks Latin would say equus, right? You know what I mean? Those sound like very different words, right? But they're communicating the same idea. I think of it in the same way. It'll be unintelligible to somebody else, right? Does not mean it's not being efficacious, which means it's successfully communicating grace or the life of God or a communication of God. Because I believe beauty is the language of God. And so it speaks universally to us. Now, we know that languages are multiplied. There's all kinds of stuff. I mean, we could talk about Babel all day because I think there is a artistic expression of the way that we're hearing God communicate to us through beauty, through the truth. I think I think we can't deny the fact anymore that there are 30% of American Catholics who still believe in the real presence of the Blessed Sacrament.
Yeah.
And there's two places where that seems to be going on is where people are doing Steubenville conferences with praise and worship and adoration on their knees with their hands in the air, and people with Gregorian chant who definitely understand.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to look at why those two groups of people are finding their music efficacious was sort of my task in philosophy. And furthermore, it was to understand why somebody who doesn't believe at all in either of those things or the Blessed Sacrament can study the church and write the best sacred music of our time, which I've been finding. That my favorite composers right now of liturgical text are people who don't believe in anything at all. They just studied what we believe as Catholics, and they've just studied the history of music in the church.
And they're just following the rules.
That's it. So whatever the aesthetic of this one minister of the sacrament is, Christ, whatever the aesthetic of his church is, the aesthetic of the truth, this language of the truth is, they've learned the language.
Rather than disprove the greatness of sacred music, it proves that it's codifiable and intelligible, and maybe even enjoyable. I'm sure it's enjoyable by people who refuse to kind of connect the dots and say, I believe in the doctrines.
Right. Yeah. Let's say I went into ancient Rome right now in a time machine, and I start rattling off, I've memorized John 1. In principio erat verbum apud Deum. And then, but I don't know what I'm saying. But then somebody walks by and goes, holy crap, you're saying the logos, the reason which runs the cosmos, has become a human being.
Right.
You know what I mean? They would begin to understand that I said in the beginning was the Word and the Word was God. They would begin to understand something very different. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so that's what I feel like a lot of these artists are doing. They don't know what they're saying, but they're rattling off something that's so true, so beautiful that it's changing things. It's changing something.
Well, that's really something to think about, isn't it?
Basically, there's a doctrine ex opere operatum, which it's in Latin. It means by the work having been worked, meaning no matter how bad the priest is, how corrupt, the terrible things he's done, whatever, if he has the intention of Christ, the intention of the church, follows the rubrics, does the mass, it's the body of Christ, because it has nothing to do with his moral state. I was arguing in my studies, arguing for ex opere operato for sacred art. Sacred music.
Wow, you're blowing my mind here. This is great.
Because it's Christ who's doing it.
Yeah.
Christ is now the priest who is now at the altar of our hearts. It's no longer us or some idol or some society, ethnicity, biology, geography, religion, culture. Yeah. It's Jesus.
I'm going to go out on a limb here, right? This is a limb. So whatever I say here, don't hold me to it, anybody.
Even though it's on the
internet forever. Right. Please don't anybody hold me to this. But I occasionally Google pictures of pagan worship spaces, let's call them.
Yeah, sure.
And sometimes you'll see, for example, the Hindus, they have these beautiful places. And there's this part of me that says, I get it, smash all the idols, whatever. There's part of me that kind of just like bucks against it and says they don't get it. They don't understand what God is. This is all one big fat lie. But it's not. Like there's something also that's coming through for these people, something about their faith that is genuine, that is attached to those styles, those colors, the sacred architecture that they're using, the statues, the all those things, the incense, the everything that makes me say, okay, I am in no way endorsing any Hindu doctrine whatsoever, but there is that impulse inside of them. There's something about it that's scratching some itch that their soul has to know God.
I think that's beautiful. Yeah. Well, I want to focus on your immediate impulse of anger because
no, not anger, but you know what I'm saying, like
rage.
Anger and rage, and this is not
like Phineas in the desert.
This is not of God. No. I mean, look, people have died for this, right?
Sure.
People have died for the right God. They have died for the one true God, and they have fought people who thought that their God was the one true God. And I don't think there's even a comparison between, lesser gods and the one true God that we believe in the transcendental sense of love and of beauty and of truth and of justice and of being itself. And so I believe in all those things so strongly that anything that seems to compete with it makes me want to say away with anything that like get rid of anything that competes with it.
Sure.
While at the same time, and it's simultaneous. It's not like a first impulse and then a second impulse. It's a simultaneous impulse where I say, I appreciate the way that they have codified that thing for them that puts them in touch with something that's scratching an itch
Well,
that they
I
have
would
to
say
worship
that's
God.
grace,
Right.
Father. That's grace, because I don't think that's a natural thing to then move to.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, now forgive your enemy.
Mm-hmm.
Now love your. Now pray for your enemy. These
Sure.
these are revelations,
Mm-hmm.
because it would make sense for you to be totally repellent and averse to these things, because it's not a part of your tradition. It's not a clear, embrace of the truth of the word which has become flesh. But I want to focus on your immediate instinct there, because it's an instinct which is shared by this one Christ.
Mm-hmm.
I'm teaching my students right now about Jesus' entry into Jerusalem, the last week of his life. And what happens is he goes into Jerusalem, and he's not hiding it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't say, now go show yourselves to the priests to be restored in right worship and in your humanity and in being part of this Jewish community, ethnicity, etc., etc., etc. Now he heals people on the way as he goes in Jerusalem, and they stay with him and they follow him. Everything starts changing, and his apostles say, this is the Messiah. This is God. This is the Word become flesh.
Mm-hmm.
And then this priest say, tell him to stop, like you have been before. And he says, if I stopped him, the stones in the street would cry out that I'm the Messiah, that I'm the Son of God. Things are changing. And what is the next thing he does? He goes straight to the temple and tears it up, throws over the tables, cleans it out. He said, my Father's house will be a house of prayer. This place of worship has been made into a marketplace. But he does it not inside the temple, in the court of the Gentiles, which is the court of the nations, which is the place where people who are not of Jewish ethnicity can come in and offer a meager offering and get a little portion of God's mercy, a little portion of grace. He goes and cleans that place out and says, I'm about to make you very uncomfortable, because I'm about to make this temple into a human form. It is my body. And it's going to be destroyed just as it has been destroyed today. And you will destroy it. You'll tear it apart. And in 3 days, I will rebuild it. His rage in that moment, the zeal for his house, which is consuming him for right worship, is no longer just about an ethnicity. It's no longer just about one language. It's no longer just about one race or one culture, geography. It's about being human. Now the temple is our hearts. And so the liturgy has to start reflecting this. And so when we look at other religions, we have that immediate response, which is good. But then you have the grace of the resurrection, which is a revealed thing. People don't rebuild the temple of the body very often. It's only happened once. He's rebuilt the temple of the body. And so it's a revealed grace to say, now in the councils, for example, the councils of the church, we can write Nos Tratate, Dominus Jesus, right? Lumen Gentium. And we can see that the truth is imbuing and pervading everything, now that the word has not just become human, but in doing so has become one with the elements. And so he's pervading everything. And so his body is being torn apart. It kills him. Right? And it's spreading through time and space. And so beauty is this is what John Paul II says in his retreat for artists. Beauty is now emptying himself and being torn apart by us, broken up into pieces, crushed like the grape of wine, crushed like the wheat to become the Eucharist, baked in the oven of his zeal and of our rage and our misunderstanding. And so what I love about what St. Bonaventure says about beauty in response to this is that Christ, the suffering servant who becomes ugly and recognizable, is because God has shriveled himself up and has completely emptied himself of life. And so beauty, him being beauty itself, beauty on the cross, has successfully emptied all of infinite beauty into the earth. Up to that last breath, this new temple has been torn up by our rage, by our specificity and our rigidity, and he turns it into a scandalous gift of the entire life of God, and therefore all of beauty itself. That transcendental has now become like the air we breathe. Right. And what right do we have to that? The angels don't even have that. It's in it's in the fabric of our being.
It's fantastic, John. That's fantastic. I think there's a lot to think about there. There's a whole lot to think about there, and it didn't, not to just think about, but to appreciate and to drive us to do the right things when we worship, the right things when we present ourselves to God, in union with Christ on the cross and on the altar. So what does it say then about our culture? I see sort of
Mhm.
I see something like a shift, right?
Mhm.
And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's always been like this.
This is gonna be good. I
But
can
this
tell.
is kind of a shift that I've seen, right? So there's this National Lampoon's Chevy Chase. What is it called? Vacation.
Yes, yes.
So he and his family, another movie you should not watch. They find themselves going out to the Grand Canyon, and Chevy Chase's character steps out of the car,
Yes.
and he walks out to the Grand Canyon, and he looks out and goes, "The Grand Canyon, right? You're just waiting to see this great wonder of the world." And he takes in a deep breath and goes, "Okay, let's go." right. And he gets back in the car. Like, so he was able to appreciate beauty for about, I don't know, the space of 4 seconds.
Yeah.
And then he's bored. And he's like, I've seen it, done it. Like the novelty of the beauty is done.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is a very true thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Why does it get old?
It gets old right away. There's something about it that gets old right away. Now,
I'm at the point now where I don't put any images up in my bedroom.
Because
there's nothing on the walls.
They get old quick.
Because I'm tired of getting tired of good things.
Yeah. Right.
I'm serious.
So yeah, in a sense that something that should be sacred has been put out into the public. So something like the Grand Canyon is just there naked for the whole world to see anytime you pass by it, and you can't ignore it because it's right there.
Right.
But we've also seen photographs of this now. We've seen films, and long before I saw the Grand Canyon myself. And listen, it's something. The Grand Canyon is something. It's weird to see. Like when you look up in the sky and you see clouds so far away, it's weird to look down into a cavern and see something so far away when you look down.
In the opposite direction.
It's disorienting.
It's
disorienting. It's like somebody took a mountain, turned it upside down, and pressed it into the earth and left this imprint of this upside down mountain that you're looking into. It's really impressive. And I also know that I don't necessarily want to just go live there forever and stare at the Grand Canyon forever.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Now, here's the shift that I see.
Yeah.
People want you to believe that they have a sense of recognizing that beauty. So what they'll do is they'll take pictures of, or have somebody take a picture of them looking at the Grand Canyon, right? Or they'll have a picture of, I want you to take, so what you'll do is you'll find the most beautiful view, and then I'll go stand in front of that view and look at it, and I want you to take my picture looking at the beautiful view. Like I want to look like a connoisseur of beautiful things.
Yeah.
I want to look like a connoisseur, an appreciator of all these beautiful things. I want you to think that I appreciate all those beautiful things.
And then you make it public.
And I make it public because what it's really about is me showing you a false version of myself, an inauthentic version of myself.
Or to show them an authentic version of yourself, which you're totally insecure about.
Or something like that.
Yeah.
Something like that, right?
Sure.
If you think about all the people, it happens. It happens. All the people downtown New Orleans. We have a beautiful church. The Jesuits have a beautiful church downtown. I think it's probably the best looking church in a city full of beautiful churches.
Handsome church.
It's a handsome church, an Immaculate Conception on Baronne Street. Sometimes it's referred to as Jesuit Church because the Jesuits for so long have had that church since the 1840s, 1850s. And people go in there all the time, and they're carrying with them their giant drink that they just got off of Bourbon Street, and they're dressed in these clothes that look ridiculous. So people from other parts of the country imagine that New Orleans is Mardi Gras year round, right? So they're dressed up like these Mardi Gras warriors, and then they go into the church, and like for a second or two, they are stunned by
they put down that giant hand grenade.
They are stunned by they wonder, like, should I even have this in here? Should I be dressed the way that I'm dressed? Should there's something weird here? I've got all these Mardi Gras beads on that I might have gotten for doing bad things, and here I am in this church, and it's like they're shocked for a second. Yeah. And they often turn, like I've been there and I had times where they turn to me and say, "What is this place?" I'm like, "It's a church." You know, it's a church. You just haven't been in a church this beautiful before, right? And so, like, there's a sense of like they feel like they're somewhere between heaven and earth.
There's awe, there's curiosity, but then my favorite part of beauty, the demand, which I think we should talk about at some point.
Well, then say something about the demand.
Well, I want to talk about a lot of things in terms of the shift, where we see things and they get old quickly, and what does that mean? And isn't it a shame that people walk into churches like this and then it's over? You know, but there's that moment where it demands something. So, you know, in ancient philosophy, particularly in Neoplatonic stuff, it's an ascent to beauty from like little things. It's sort of like a diet. I start with little things and then I get bigger. You start with puppy love with like dogs and cats, and then you make your way up to a human being, and then to your mom and dad's kind of love for you, and then a spouse kind of love for you, and then a higher one that you have for your kid, and then you get to kind of love which is way bigger. And this is where we get the idea of the 4 loves from C.S. Lewis, right? There's 3 different types, right? And I won't say them because it's all Greek and it's, not necessary right now. But then Jesus reveals the 4th one on the cross. There's a different one, and that one, it's a shame because it's very, very ugly. In fact, the prophecies of the Old Testament say he's ugly. He's unrecognizable. You won't know who he is. You won't understand. He's born homeless, rejected by Joseph's family line in Bethlehem, and he's born outside. Yeah. So there's just this constant flip, just like you're saying about what you're seeing in nature there, these awesome sights.
I used to teach that in your senior course that you took at Jesuit High School.
Oh, there you go. See?
So
it's coming to fruition.
If you remember the kind of love that agape love, right? Or agape love. Right. The definition that I would give you all, and I don't remember where I got it. I'm sure I got it from somebody much smarter than me, but it was that kind of love which does not depend on the lovability of the beloved.
I love that.
And you're not supposed to use the word love in the definition of love, but but I did it anyway.
Right.
That kind of love which does not depend on the lovability of the beloved.
I think that's a very good definition, because usually it's being defined in a philosophical sense in a universal self-gift, total self-giving, right? Which is what Jesus does on the cross. But what we've done is we've taken that symbol of him on receiving capital punishment, disguised as a criminal, abandoned by all of his friends. A failure, basically. Yeah. We've gilded that in gold.
I love it that way, though.
And we've put it, hey, I'm not saying it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
What I love about the aesthetics of beauty in the Catholic Church is you can put gold leaf on something like a confessional box. I mean, you can take, because what the aesthetics of the church are doing is they're not bringing new beauty into the world. That is not what they're doing. They are showing you what your senses are failing to see in these places of darkness, because that is where Christ has descended to give fully the fullness of beauty, the fullness of merciful love.
And that impulse is okay. So there's a cathedral in Seville, Spain. Yeah. The plaque on the outside of this gigantic, gorgeous. It's too gorgeous to be in Seville, right? You would think this belongs in the Vatican or something like that. It's just gorgeous, and there's a plaque that says, and I'm going to paraphrase, but it says, we will build a church so big and so beautiful that everyone will think we are mad, right? I love this. We sort of talked about, to bring it full circle, we talked earlier about, that there's this impulse to hide our imperfections with the lace and the beautiful vestments and the gold and the shiny and the everything. And we're going to hide all of our imperfections because we're somehow compensating for a part of us that is not yet converted, right? That is not yet given itself to God completely. But I think it's going to look very similar to somebody who has given themselves to God so completely that they say that I would say, okay, if I'm in persona Christi, I want the vestments to be the finest thing I've ever put on in my life. And I want it to outdo everything I've ever done before. So it's not just wear long pants. It's wear your best long pants. It's not just wear a button-down shirt, but your best button-down shirt.
And for a priest to have the nicest vessels, to have the best.
But I don't want the cup that I'm drinking out of to look like something that I made my mother out of clay for Mother's Day when I was like 9.
Because it's not about the expression of your mother's culture. It's about the expression of God's gift.
Exactly. And so I don't want the precious blood of Christ to be in something that isn't the very best that I have to offer. Yeah. And I don't think, I do, just in terms of just the aesthetic of it, I'm not exactly in love with tons and tons of frilly lace and all this kind of stuff. But I get why somebody would say, okay, if a little lace is good, why not a lot? If a little incense is good, why not a lot? If whatever. So I want this to smell the best of anything I've ever done. I want this to look the best of anything I've ever done. I want this to sound the best. And so our choir needs to be the best choir we could ever get. Sure. I get that instinct.
It makes sense because beauty is a demand, right? Mm-hmm. The ancient philosophers would say it's an ascent. But what I'm seeing through Bonaventure is that it's a demand. It demands love, that kind of new love, which is real, demands a definitive response. A definitive response, which Karol Wojtyła, Pope St. John Paul II would say, is something which self-actualizes oneself. It makes you more yourself. You're receiving from God who he created you to be, because you, who are in the image and likeness of beauty itself,
Mhm.
are now becoming one with beauty itself, saying yes,
Yeah.
like Mary, through Mary, with Mary, right? Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. And that
Yeah.
is a response to a demand. That's when beauty becomes not just a church,
Yeah.
not just a Gothic arch, not just jeans and a clay
Yeah.
chalice, because it's not about our expression. It is about the expression which is distinctly ours from God.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's not about the
Yeah.
expression of us right now. It's about God's expression, which he's been dying to give the world through us,
And
because he made
yeah.
us as an image of him.
And it can turn things that would otherwise be thought of as ugly into beautiful in a way that is not in the slightest bit silly, you know. So
Right. Exhibit A, death.
Exhibit A, death. The wounds on Christ's hands
Yes.
after the resurrection. That's what's so crazy.
Yes.
Not just like, oh, I appreciate the cross for what it was. It's like, no, even after the resurrection, he still got the thing which glorifies his body is still there, right? The thing which looked like it kind of condemned his body is in fact glorifying it, and the marks are still there. And saints sometimes even have those marks themselves, Padre Pio or
yes.
Saint Francis of Assisi.
Mhm.
So my sister and I were talking once about the resurrection of the body, right, and what it would be like. And I'd mentioned to her that St. Thomas Aquinas thought that Jesus would be resurrected, because Jesus was resurrected at 33 years old, we would all be resurrected at about 33 years old. So my sister starts running marathons when she gets to be about 30. She's like, I want to be in the best shape of my life.
Wow.
When I resurrect, I want to be in the best shape of my life.
Because the template she makes is the only one he's going to use.
Right. So, I mean, I'm making fun of my sister. She's a great, I love my sister, but I have 3 sisters. I'm talking about one of my sisters. And so I kind of mentioned to her that I think my mother, for example, my mother had 12 children, right? So I'm number 10 out of 12 children. My mother's going to have stretch marks at the resurrection, I believe, right? That there's something that those are the marks, the signs of her glorifying God with all that she had to give him, which was just to follow her vocation to be a mother. And that my father is going to have calluses on his hands, and is probably going to be missing that little half a finger that he's missing because he cut it off in a farming accident. My dad's a farmer, and I think there's something about having marks or scars or signs on your body that say, I gave it to God. I gave my body to God.
Yeah.
Even my body was given to God.
Yeah. Well, I like where you're going with that. And I want to push it a little bit further because, again, every time you love a beautiful church, remind yourself that it's going to blow up one day, or that's going to turn to dust. Whenever a pope was elected back in the day, a server or a deacon or something would have this little plate on a stick, and they would burn a little piece of wool, which was off of his fabric. And they say, "Sic fugit gloria mundi." That so flees the glory of this world.
Right.
And they have this little smoke, and you smell like this burning animal hair.
Yeah.
The pope is supposed to smell it on his way out onto the balcony to greet the people,
right?
So that he can remember that all this is going to go to dust,
right?
And so you have to ask yourself, what do these symbols, like your parents' hands and the stretch marks on your mama's arms from bearing children and from cooking and working and loving and just giving herself, and your dad losing that part of his finger and having calluses and working on stuff in the world and working with you, what do those things mean for you? These things which the world, again, going back to the elderly woman and the infant, why are these things beautiful? Because beauty is no longer to be defined as a pleasurable aesthetic, which orients your life around the truth.
And it's subjective.
That's it can even be objective. And in the ancient philosophical definition, you could say it is an aesthetic which pleasurably draws someone to orient their life around the truth. My new definition, with the help of Aquinas and Bonaventure, with this Neoplatonic take, is it's whatever demands. It's not whatever draws. It's what demands someone to love, which is the reception of the truth itself, irregardless of its aesthetic, tactile beauty. Because beauty is being expressed in one way in the world through gold leaf and Gothic arches, and right worship and all that jazz. Yeah. But those things are not beauty itself. They're basically like the poetry about beauty, because beauty really is this unseen thing which you can look at something ugly and see, okay, there's the truth. There's the truth. And so I love that you mentioned your dad's hands and your mom and your mom's arms and their bodies being an expression of beauty, but that the rest of the world wouldn't want to look at that all day.
Yeah.
But you're in love with the idea.
Yeah.
I think we should think the same way about a beautiful church, even
Yeah.
if it's dinky, even if it's stuck in the, even if it's stuck in a different place. So I think that's important to look at.
Technical difficulties here on the Viva show. Earlier, we were getting so excited. It got so hot in here that the fire alarm went off. Y'all probably saw a blinking light over our shoulders. Yeah, so some guys are working on a number of things in the building, and so the fire alarm went off. But we couldn't hear it because I've disabled the speaker. All right. Well, listen, that is this has been a fantastic conversation. You are a musician. You have, I think, a YouTube channel.
I do.
What is your tell us what your YouTube channel is.
So my YouTube channel.
I'll try to type it into the chat here so people can see it.
It's John Guerra, SJ.
JOHNGUERRA with no space.
With a space between John and Guerra.
All right.
John Guerra, SJ.
SJ, no period.
That's it. That's it.
Just John Guerra, SJ.
That's it.
If guys search that,
they will find my YouTube channel, which has a bunch of my compositions on there, different works by different choirs, which I've composed, and by different groups of Jesuits in Escola singing. And you'll hear a lot of different masses, psalms, things like that. You will also see a promotional video, which is my definition of beauty. It's called What is Beauty? And that's the first video you'll see posted on the channel. It's about 2 minutes long, and it'll tell you what it is.
If I continue to do these YouTube things, I'm going to ask you to make an intro that sounds good, and then I'll.
Sounds good.
So this is great. I'm glad.
There we go.
All right, listen. Thank you for everyone who stuck around and watched some of this, and anybody who tunes in a little bit later. Thank you, John Guerra.
Thank you, Father.
When do you get ordained? How far away are you from ordination?
5 years, 6 if I get held back, 7 if I'm lucky.
All right, very good. We will pray for you and your vocation, and pray for all those people that you work with.
Thank you. Thank you.
And appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Appreciate
God bless.
you, Father.
All right. Here we go. Let's end that stream.
Nice.